Welcome back to the channel. So we're in Elements today and we are training multiple of different muscle groups. We're training calves, we're training bench, we're training arms, we're training delts. So I'm starting off with some seated calf raises, and we have kind of two major calf muscles. So we have the gastrocnemius and we have the soleus. So the gastrocnemius is the head of the calf that makes up the biggest portion of your calf muscle. It's the one that's the most visible. It's the one that's on top. The soleus, that is a deeper muscle. We don't really see it as much. However, just because you're not able to see something does not necessarily mean that you should not train it, right? The gastric is going to be the piece on top, but if you grow your soleus, the one that's deeper, as that grows, it's going to push the muscle outwards, and that's going to just make your calves look bigger. So if you think about this in the context of back training, for example, like your lats are going to be very prominent, like your teres major, that's going to be very prominent. Your traps are going to be quite prominent too. However, things like rhomboids, things like your erectors, you're not able to really see them as much because they're quite deep. However, if you've ever seen somebody who has developed good erectors, you'll notice that they have the density to their back because they have actually built the muscles that are deeper. And as a result, their back looks like there's just more muscle in general. So that's the kind of concept here, which I'm going for with training my soleus. Like, I think for the most part, if you're looking to train your calves, spending most of your time actually developing the gastrocnemius is probably going to be better because it is a bigger muscle. When you look at a straight leg calf raise, we're going to be able to get in a full stretch into the gastroc because it's going to be stretching at the ankle, but then across the knee joint as well, it's also going to be stretched too. So then you're getting a fully stretched gastroc. That's going to be the best place or best exercise for you to actually target that muscle. Whereas with this, the only way you're really going to be able to kind of train it like in isolation without the gastroc taking over is going to be with this, where you're actually kind of keeping the knee bent and flexing at the ankle joint. All right. So one thing also that is very important when you're doing these is to not be bouncing like this. You're getting absolutely fuck all out of the movement. Slow it down. Drive down to the big toe. Control, control, control. Pause at the bottom. So currently I'm doing what you'd probably say a minimum effective dose of calf training at the moment. So I'm doing 5 sets a week. In previous times, I have gone as high as 12, I believe, and that was probably during the lockdown period. Whereas like now, because I'm trying to train a lot of different muscle groups, and like there's only so much volume you can do, and only so much that you can recover from, which is the most important thing, right? Is like how much you can recover from, and not like the overall volume. And then as well, time, right? So like there is a decent amount of like kind of research from out now talking about like, you know, the upper limit of like the amount of sets one can do and grow muscle mass, and like obviously that is proof of concept that, you know, maybe there is an upper limit of like 40, 50 plus sets per week for some people. But at the same time, the amount of time you can spend in the gym matters. The amount of time that you can spend in the gym and actually focus matters. And you will hear some people say, oh, well, that's a you issue, but like it's an issue nonetheless. So like, you know, you can't just like tell somebody that they need to focus more or they need to spend more time in the gym and hope that fixes the issue of like them being able to do enough volume. So when you are trying to, I suppose, decide how much volume to do per muscle group per week, when you're looking at a more bodybuilding focus, you do need to take into consideration, okay, like what is like not just the maximum, but what's the minimum amount of sets I can do per week and see some type of progress. So I had for a long time done up to 12 sets per muscle group, 12 sets per week on calves, went down to 8, and at the moment I'm doing 5, and like they certainly are getting decreasing in size. Now I haven't measured them in a while, but the last time I checked they are like 17 inches, and I haven't really kind of dipped below that like because what I'm really doing when I am actually training them now is those 5 sets per week I am going pretty damn hard. So you see when I'm actually performing these sets that I am doing some partials. I'm not like going through a kind of full range of motion and I'm cutting the actual set when I simply can't get my foot from, say this is like my heel and this is where my toes are. Once I can't get it up to like being level or parallel to the ground, then there's a calling set there, because realistically I'm just stretching the calf at that point. But it is well, not one, but it's like one of the muscle groups that has been looked at in like the kind of more kind of length and bias training kind of research to be shown to be more effective by doing partial range of motion, where you're getting more of your reps in the stretch than in the short or versus full range of motion. So it is absolutely something to consider if you only have limited amount of time to do calf training, or if you want to bias a little bit more volume towards other muscle groups. If you're going to be doing calves, make sure you're getting in a lot of that training to be very, very intense and getting a lot of failure reps past that stretch point. So the goal of this block for pretty much all of my lifts is simply just like volume accumulation, as opposed to like getting towards my peak strength. And yeah, that's something I kind of found out pretty quickly when I was speaking with John this week in my check-in. After a block like the last one I had, where like, you know, my squat got up to like a really, really high peak, bench was not great, and deadlift, it was great up until week 3. It did take a little bit of a nosedive. And I think what I was trying to push too much on the likes of my bench as well as my deadlift was trying to chase the numbers too much. Whereas squat, not so much. I had a little bit more of a kind of steady approach, and I was really just thinking of like building as many reps as I could with a heavy weight versus chasing a top end weight. Now I eventually reached a top end weight because I was taking that approach. And that's essentially what we're doing in this block here, right? So this is touch and go bench, and I'm performing with like a kind of slightly narrower grip to my competition grip. So usually my competition grip is my index finger over the ring, whereas this one I go with my ring finger over the ring. And the reason why I'm actually bringing my actual grip in is we're operating in the rep range of 6. Okay, so not even rep range, just the repetition number. We're doing 6 reps. It's going to be a good amount of reps where I can get a really, really high potent stimulus for hypertrophy. But then as well, if I go for it with too narrow or too wide of a grip, I'm actually going to be challenging less muscle groups in ranges where they might have a little bit more of a benefit for hypertrophy, right? So think about a wide grip bench, right? I'm at this point here with my wrist outside of my elbow, not a huge amount of length going on the tricep, right? An area where I need to grow more muscle and potentially that could give me strength potential down the line. I want to get a little bit more kind of length into my delt too, to also challenge them and grow them a little bit more, as well as my pecs. I want to grow them a little bit more too. With a wide grip, you're actually trying to reduce the range of motion and the amount of work that your muscles have to perform. So that itself is taken away from the goal of hypertrophy, right? So wide grip bench is not going to be a good option if you are looking to grow your pecs, your delts, or your triceps. That's why I'm bringing my grip a little bit more, okay? Because now when I get down to the bottom end of range of motion, a bit more stretch in my pecs, a bit more stretch in my delts, a bit more contribution from the triceps as well through the mid-range, and that's essentially why I'm using it now. So my main tricep heavy press. So I do think if you're looking to grow your triceps, especially to carry over to your bench, there needs to be at least one like tricep isolation movement that is like heavy, like especially if you're operating the same plane of motion to what you're going to be using in your bench press, right? So what I mean by that is you doing a set of 5 on a tricep extension, the mechanics of that are so different to your regular bench press that I don't necessarily think that the adaptations you'll get, both from a strength or hypertrophy perspective, especially from a strength perspective, right? Because it's strength of the skill. I don't necessarily think they're going to carry over the same way they would if you developed really good strength at a JM press, right? So that's what I'm doing here. So using a barbell, I was using a Smith machine beforehand, but the Smith machine in this gym is just incredibly busy all the time. So, you know, I'm not going to go between Smith machine one day, barbell the next day. I'd rather just kind of keep it consistent throughout. Doesn't mean I have to use that I can use less weight. Yeah, for sure. Might there be some carryover from the fact that now I have to stabilize the bar a little bit better and kind of get a little bit tighter around my kind of lats, get tighter in the bench, you know, maybe use a little bit more control. Yeah, for sure, okay? But at the same time, I'm still going to be getting some benefit. So with this, I am trying to get to a point where I'm able to do maybe it's set between 5 to 8, but kind of getting to that place at the moment with the barbells is proving to be a little bit difficult because it's only my second week actually doing this with the barbell. So one reason why I love the actual JM press is because unlike the close grip bench press, right? Close grip bench press, you are getting a lot more chest and you're also getting a lot more delt. And with the skull crusher, for most people when they get heavy, they just really aggravate their elbows. Whereas this one here, right, because as I come down and the bar pretty much stays over my shoulder at the bottom, there's no challenge to this shoulder at this bottom position. Because my humerus, my arm is not traveling behind my body, there's actually no stretch in the chest at all. I'm pretty much just getting like a fully loaded tricep here. But then when you look at the likes of me getting into this position here, with a really heavy weight, there's going to be a lot of strain in those elbow tendons that make it quite hard to actually get the load up to a substantial degree. As well as at least here in this bottom position here, right, I got a little bit of compression here, got a little bit of support at the bottom, okay, when my elbow is going to be fully flexed, which may be giving me a little bit more kind of comfort in this bottom position relative to when I have it up here, okay? If you think about the difference in levers as well, right? If we think about, as I'm here with this JM press, right, there's going to be a decent lever between the elbow to the bar of my hand, all right, but I am getting a little bit of compressive force here at the bottom from the elbow coming down and kind of resting on my lats essentially, okay? Now, when I go into this overhead position, okay, there's no support at all from the upper arm, so my lats are having to stabilize here a lot harder, but the barbell is now pulling straight down, so the amount of kind of force I need to generate or stabilization these tendons need in this position is a lot higher, which is kind of why I'm enjoying this a little bit more over the sculptor. Now that's just in theory, that's not complete science, but that's what's working in my brain. Cable curls, overhead tricep extensions. You can see that I'm using one of like the easy curl bars, so the ones with like the grooves in them, as opposed to the straight bar. So when should you be using one of those, and when should you use a straight bar? So a lot of times it just really comes down to your ability to get into like full supination here at the wrist. So you kind of see here, if I raise my arms up like this, I really have to like actively externally rotate my hands to get into this position here, and then to maintain that throughout the entirety of the movement. When it's loaded, I have to essentially do more work at the like that to kind of essentially bring my arms into that degree of like supination. And then because it's not my natural plane of motion of my arms, it's going to be a lot harder to kind of maintain that, as I say, it's quite heavy, but it's not necessarily offering me much more benefit, right? So using the more kind of like easy curl bar that allows me to kind of maintain my natural degree of like supination, it just means that I'm putting less strain on my elbow joints over time, because I'm operating within the plane that like my biceps are looking to move, right? You can see there as I'm moving that arm, it's not moving straight up and down, right? It's not moving directly up and down in a straight motion. And this is called carry angle. So carry angle essentially is the deviation of your radius and ulna from your humerus. And you can see massive deviations in this with a lot of people, which is why, you know, when you're training your arms, it's probably better off for most people to use dumbbells versus use a fixed bar like a barbell. Or if they are going to use a fixed implement, use something like an easy curl bar. So try it out for yourself and see, okay, like, you know, if your elbows are nagging you doing barbell curls, give the easy curl bar a go, or just like outright swap to dumbbells or a single arm cable. And you'll probably find that you don't really get as much of a nagging pain in your elbows because you're able to operate within kind of natural plane of which your biceps are looking to move. All right. So final two movements, as you have seen, one of them was the face away cable curl. So we don't have like, there's like not like really any kind of scientific evidence about like exercise sequencing based off like length tension relationships or where within an exercise it is hardest relative to the strength of your muscle. So say for example, right, when I'm doing the face away cable curl, especially when I have the cable set that's a perpendicular to my arm, and as my elbows behind my body, the hardest part of that motion is at the very, very start, okay? That's also when your bicep is the most stretched. Technically, the easiest portion is when you're getting to this portion where your elbow's pretty much quite closed and the bicep is short, okay? Now, if you contrast that to if you're lying down your front on a bench, right, and your elbow is like out here and you're doing a bicep curl, so a spider curl, the hardest portion of that movement is not at the bottom. It's very easy at the bottom. You can do the bottom all day, but the hardest part is at the top. Or even if we took this exact same position, so face away cable curl, right, elbow behind the body, cable from perpendicular from hand, versus a dumbbell incline curl, right? Dumbbell incline curl, you're still sitting up in this, you're still in this position, the elbow's still behind the body. However, because the dumbbell's acting straight down, the hardest part is not at the bottom, even though your bicep's stretched, it's at the top, right? So there's like pretty much like no like research on that at the moment in regards to exercise sequencing. However, from like a kind of theoretical position, it does make sense to, at the very start of a training session, to maybe do more exercises that are more like feely. So the hardest in short position. So if you're training legs, that might be like a lying hamstring curl. If you're doing like quads, it could be a leg extension. If you're doing biceps, it could be a spider curl. If it's doing chest, it could be a machine fly. Now, you don't necessarily need to do them, but if you actually struggle to connect with a muscle group, this could be a good opportunity to do it. So if you struggle to connect with your chest, maybe doing a machine chest fly prior to doing bench press could be a good idea. If you struggle to connect with your quads in your leg press, or not connect with your quads but feel them at all, or maybe your quads don't fail first on leg press, well then maybe you do a leg extension, okay? So that would be like one kind of like theoretical reason why we could do it. But then also just from how muscles fail within the movement. So muscles will typically fail in the short position, right? When they're contracting. Like you think about any exercise and when that seems to get the hardest, or when where typically most people fail, is when the muscle is shortening, okay? That's because if you think about like the cross bridges of a muscle fiber, right? So if we think about these are like the actin and myosin cross bridges, right? This is in the mid-range where they have like the most kind of ability to kind of contract and produce a lot of force. If they cut them like this, right, they're way too overlapping. There's not enough room for them actually kind of shorten any further. So they're very, very weak at this point. When they're lengthened, there is a little bit of traction there, so they can produce a tiny bit more force. But we're almost always going to be strongest in this like mid-range position, weakest in the shortened, and then have a little bit more kind of strength relative to the shortened position at the length position. So with this, then we could say if we wanted to sequence a training session based off like these this length tension relationship, we could essentially say, okay, start movement, let's do most of our shortened bias exercises because we're going to fail there first anyway, so let's rinse that portion of the movement for all it's worth. Then we can move over to something that's more of a mid-range exercise where we're going to be able to produce a lot more force in the middle of the movement, right? So that could be the likes of a squat, for example. It's going to be hardest at the bottom position, but you're still going to be able to be very, very strong through that mid-range portion where the muscle is kind of getting into a position where it's, again, having this like nice overlap with the actin myosin cross bridges and producing a lot of force. Or say, for example, what we're just doing here, you see me do the cable curl. Well, cable curl, the hardest part of that movement is when I'm going into the mid-range, right? So when your arm is going from this to this. So in this portion here, the actual tension is going to be the highest. As you say, we have those exercises in the middle portion of our training session, and then towards the end, that's when we're like, okay, we can't really kind of get into this mid-range position, we can't really get into the short position too well, so let's like just finish off the movement in the length position. So that could be one way that you do it, and kind of how I've done it today. However, I haven't really been doing much kind of short and range movements because they just take up exercise slots. Like that's the way I look at them. Like if I have an issue with connecting with muscle group, I'm going to put in more of those kind of like exercise where I'm really focused on getting a good contraction and getting blood flow into the muscle. However, if I don't need them, I'm not going to use them. And I'm going to bias most of my movements towards ones that I can load quite heavy, or ones which I can load quite heavy in the stretch and fail there too. Some days I will do something like a dumbbell lat raise, right? Just to get in a little bit more volume. Because that's another great thing about doing more kind of short and range bicep movements, is you can do a lot of volume on them without adding a huge amount of fatigue. So say for example, you could do like dumbbell lateral raises like pretty much every single day, and get some degree of stimulus, but at least you're getting some kind of training effect at least, right? You're incurring some type of fatigue within the muscle tissue. Might not be able to push it to its like complete capacity in regards to how much force it can produce or how much force it can output, relative to if I did these every single day. So the cable crossovers, or whatever you want to call them, cable lateral raises, whereas they're going to be the hardest in that position when the delta is going to be more stretched. It's going to be a lot harder for me to be able to recover from them every single day if I perform them every single day, relative to the dumbbell lateral raise, because of where it's actually challenging the muscle. Because if you have ever done like hamstring curls, for example, which you probably have if you've done RDLs are so difficult to recover from because the muscle is going through that very, very long muscle length, and that causes so much more DOMs than if you're to do if you did lying hamstring curl versus a seated hamstring curl. The seated hamstring curl is going to cause more muscle damage. So be able to do the seated hamstring curl less, but lying hamstring curl more. So that's another application of being able to use these more kind of short range bicep movements. But again, I don't really use them all that much. Again, mainly for that reason, because if I am going to pick an exercise, I want to pick one that is going to be probably a little bit more effective from a muscle gain perspective. All right, because they all take time. Opportunity cost is something that you need to weigh in when it does come to make your exercise decision making. Anyway, I'm going to do one more set of these laterals and then I'm off.